Yeah, it's a funny time, isn't it? It's the one where we know what we'd like to do and what we need, but the patterns of movement and the patterns of either restrictions or greater restrictions, less restrictions, is it's taking its toll on everyone. Is that we all feeling? I'm sure you've noticed that within the country, the last 2-3 weeks, the underlying stress, angst of everyone has just gone up a notch. Well, even if they're not necessarily directly got a specific thing to be more stressed about, that underlying current, they're feeling it all around us.
Well, I was in the centre an hour ago, and we know, here comes the dog, but we know that I've been feeling a bit more anxious the last couple of weeks, and especially this last week, what's going to happen, what isn't going to happen, and worrying about like what I tell my clients to like focus on what you can control. And it's me practicing what I preach I need to do, because I just had an adjustment and I was ridiculously tight around my shoulders area. And a lot of people are feeling that anxiety right now. And I think as well that we have the change of seasons, the days are shorter, the nights are longer. And it's for a lot of people, it's the time of year where we do see seasonal affectional disorder come in. And I think that's even something worth looking at talking about.
Well, and also if we connect to really of who we are and what we are, change is the most stressful part. And as you say, a change of season, it's no surprise that we're going into cough, cold, flu season. So that's always a stress on the body. Plus we've got COVID, and then plus we've got all the restrictions and elements. So it's no wonder if we actually look at what's normal, why would the body not be showing some levels of dealing or trying to deal with stress? The key thing is it's all very well identifying that, but how do we handle it and how do we deal with it? And that's the big thing at the moment. I think it's COVID. It has taught me and highlighted to me when I look at people around. There's a clinician. What I'm really seeing is adaptability. What is people's coping mechanisms? How well are people actually letting go of what they can't control, keeping what they can control, and how well are we adapting? And it's cliche of coping with stress, but more, I think it's interesting what people's coping mechanisms, food, alcohol, other things which deflect, or all sorts of things. It's been really quite interesting.
I had an interesting call this week, so I've got my female health reboot going on. So it's a course over 8 weeks, group work with a bunch of females, where we're focusing on health from the inside out, looking at a bit more of the holistic approach rather than just calories in versus calories out. And this week we had emotional eating, and a lot of people have emotional eating. Whether it's recognized as that or not, we get stressed, we reach for something, whether it's alcohol, whether it's sweets, whether it's crisps, or whatever it is. Like, we start reaching for something. And the call was really powerful. So I got them to go through an exercise that my mentor passed down to me, and it was massively powerful to get people to realize why we're emotionally eating. And one of the things that happened is that when we do it, it's usually for a reason. So I had a client a while back who was drinking alcohol a lot and going to the pub a lot after work, and we linked it around. He had an unhappy relationship at home, so he was finishing work at the office, going straight to the bar and having drinks because he didn't want to go home to his then girlfriend. And it took a big decision to actually get out of that relationship, and he was instantly happier. Not saying leave the one you're with, but he was instantly happier when he recognized that he'd cut that relationship and stopped drinking and lost 25 pounds. But one of the women in the group was it was really powerful, because we were talking about her emotional eating side of things with chocolate, and how she turns to chocolate and she's like, I'll just have a couple of bars or a bar in the evening. And we were looking at why. And what it turned out was that her grandparents, and usually things are actually ingrained in us as a kid. I spoke about my emotional eating before, and eating all the crisps when Match of the Day comes on, and how that was linked to my dad. But her grandparents used to give her chocolate on a Friday night, and that meant that she felt nurtured, she felt safe. And that feeling, our subconscious seems to get hold of that feeling of feeling safe, and they link it with chocolate. So we have chocolate to feel safe. Now, then what she was doing is as her kids were growing up, she'd give them chocolate as a treat, and it was essentially like that same feeling was transferred to them. Now they're off at university and she's eating chocolate during the week, and it actually turned out that she misses her kids that much, which is a powerful thing to then realize that you're having that chocolate because it's a feeling that you're missing your child, and like this really big emotional eating side of thing which comes on, and a lot of people will have it, and usually it's in times of stress.
Yeah, well, stress will always amplify whatever either coping mechanisms, good or bad.
Yeah.
So some people will have past stresses and actually know, oh, I can identify these are my characteristics of how I negatively respond to stress. So identify what's going on, and then they've learned and go into more appropriate coping mechanisms. But it's very, very often the behavior is not the problem. It's a bit like with people who are trying to lose weight. The diet is very seldom the answer. It's actually the anchor. What is going on? The same with emotional eating, isn't it? It's the food which gives us the temporary hit, and actually it's a physiological benefit. So the body's actually not doing anything wrong. It's looking for that sugar craving for energy, or it's looking for, as you say, the chocolate is a great one because the body knows that there's magnesium with chocolate, which is depleted in times of stress, and there's a serotonin hit with it. And if we're lacking a bit of energy and overloaded, there's a sugar. So why would the body not be attracted to the sugar? Attracted to the chocolate as opposed to being attracted to a lettuce leaf? The lettuce leaf's just not going to cut it at that point physiologically.
Also, as well, when you look deeper into things of that, the physiological makeup of the body, stress leads to releasing cortisol. It's the stress hormone, right?
Yeah.
How do we lower cortisol? One of the things which practically instantly lowers cortisol is having carbohydrates, and our body craves that as a result. And it's not going to crave potatoes would be okay, or a little bit of rice, but chances are it's going to crave the carbohydrates that are going to spike our blood sugar more.
Yeah, and usually there's going to be a dip or an unstable blood sugar regulation as because of the stress. But repeated, which I think the key to differentiate is between acute stress and a chronic stress. Acute stress will be right now. I need that energy to complete that physical task. It makes sense. The damaging one is the chronic stress. It's the low grade repeated, because the body doesn't differentiate between how it responds to chronic stress and acute stress. So acute stress being that one-off hit. The chronic stress is that hit is repeated, and that's where it becomes a problem, because now you are drinking a bottle of wine or two a night. It's not just that one night where you go, you know what, I just had a bad day and I'm going to just sit here, I'm going to have a packet of crisps and a couple of glasses of wine. At the end of the day, health-wise, that's not hugely destructive. It's one night. But now if it's repeated every night and becomes a behavior, now that becomes a different thing. So it's important, I think, people to understand that the physiological response to stress is designed for the flight or fright, to fight the lion, to here and now. It's never designed to have multiple fights. The body was never designed to survive that. It never had that environment. So the chronic stress at the moment now is really challenging people, because we know that the restrictions and the impact that COVID is something we're going to be living with for some time, and that's creating the chronic stress.
Yeah, it's the fear of the unknown,
but the fear of the unknown multiplied day in, day out. It's not being alleviated tomorrow.
No.
So the angst that we hold on to today will be with us tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's are we going to have a good Christmas? Is it going to go into New Year? And essentially it will do, but how is that going to look, and how are we going to do it? And it's all these things which we can't necessarily control. And we just had the conversation about focusing on what can we control. And I feel awareness, going back to the drinking and things like that, awareness is going to be crucial for people to start getting on top of if they're emotionally eating, or if they're having a lot, because a lot of people have a glass of wine every night or something like that. Maybe a glass of wine, maybe 2 glasses of wine, and they think it's normal, as so on. But then they have it on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It goes every night. On a Saturday, they may then have half a bottle each as a couple, and on a Sunday they might have a full bottle or something. And before you know it, it's binge drinking when we add up those units. And that goes with anything as well. I don't drink. I don't like the taste of alcohol, not because of a health benefit or anything like that. If I like the taste of alcohol, I'd have some alcohol every now and then. In fact, I had a cocktail a couple of weeks ago. It would have tasted so much better if it was a pina colada. It would tasted so much better with just the pineapple stuff. I should have just ordered pineapple juice. But when people have that realization that they are binge drinking, you can start. And some people, it's about taking responsibility for it, which is like some people don't want to, which is fair enough. And realization of knowing you're doing it for lowering that stress, but also knowing what that stress is. Because without knowing that, how can you do something about it?
Well, yeah, you've got to identify the stress, acknowledge how it's affecting you, and then look at the ways that we can change, modify how we interact with that stress. I think sometimes a lot of stress is actually people are taking on stress that it doesn't serve a purpose and they actually don't need. When people aren't connected to what is going on, some people are getting stressed out about, an almost global element of, it's the downside of globalization. What's happening in France, what's happening in Germany, what's going on. My wife and I were talking about the other night, and, a lot of people ask me about what's going on in South Africa and how they cope with it. And I have a rough idea, but to be honest, I don't track it because it's not really relevant.
Not for you.
It's relevant to my family, and all I need to know is that my family are coping with it out in South Africa. But as far as their individual policies, I don't really know what they're doing, because it's not something that I need to track and fill. So, but if I did, all it would do is add that more of, there's restrictions, and even in South Africa doing this, and that's so tough for them, and what about that? And actually, when you break it down to it, it's as a patient said to me the other day, it's not my circus. I don't need to juggle the elements to that. I can track it, or want to know that individuals who I care about are coping okay. But how they cope and what they do is I have no control over. So it's having that awareness of what do I really need to be concerned about, and what do I therefore need to put my energy in. And once you then identify and you can put your energy into that, you actually get more control of that situation, and then realize actually there are things that I can do. I've got loads of patients, I'm sure you've had, who've actually found that because of COVID and because of restrictions, they've realized that there's a lot of things that they put in place that they didn't need. There's a lot of things that they have found that they now do that benefit them more. And they actually have a clearer idea and a more decluttered life because of COVID. So that's also the other flip side. That's what's also possible.
Yeah, I found as well, the last 2 or 3 weekends, I think it is, I've deleted all social media from my phone. And the first time I'll put it back on, and it takes discipline to do it. I've got Facebook Messenger purely for client contact, but I can't consume content through Facebook Messenger. And I've got WhatsApp on my phone and text messages, so my clients can still contact me. But Facebook being deleted at the weekend, Twitter, Instagram, and the first time I put it back on is when I do my first live. So if I haven't got a live scheduled on Monday, it'll be back on Tuesday. My weekends, I've been much more present. Maybe I weren't too present when I did put Twitter on when Man United lost to that team in white. But I was a bit frustrated then. But I mean, my stress levels were a bit higher until an hour later when Liverpool done it. So that was a bit easier to take.
That helped. That helped the pain.
That helped the pain.
That reduced the stress levels.
Yeah, I wish I'd have just deleted Sky as well for that match. But anyway, it's crazy how much those extra scrolling minutes as such, how much stress they add. And
we watched the other night on Netflix the Social Dilemma.
Social Dilemma, that's the one. Yeah.
It was really interesting.
Yeah. I think some of it has, like, when we see things like What the Health, you see the vegan one and that sort of stuff. Some of it has probably been dramatized, like drastically, like increased. But I know from using Facebook marketing in my business over the years how much we can actually dive into and target people. I could target like an audience of a very small number by specifically looking at the demographics, and for them to know that information is powerful. Now, I'm not as worried about it myself, because like if I want to buy something online, I know all I've got to do is search for it on Google, then scroll through Facebook, and I get it cheaper because I'm targeted by 50 ads for it.
But what also made me think about that, with the stress levels and around at the moment and COVID, was also that you realize that that's also happening with traditional media outlets, where it used to be pick up the paper. Now people have got apps, so they can go onto the news, all the news apps. The news apps are doing exactly the same thing. They are making headlines and making stories so that you come back and tap on their website. You know, they are targeting you to be a customer, be a consumer. So that was really quite interesting. And then it goes back into that, as I said, that stress levels of people actually becoming aware of that, so that they just tap in. And so I have the beauty at work that I'm away from it all with patients. So I can't be bombarded about what changes and policies have come in through. I don't know anything today. I haven't looked at any social media or any news or anything today. And I'll tap into a bit of this evening when I get.
Oh, still there.
There we go. I'll tap into
That's
bit
Facebook
of that.
fighting back. That is.
Yeah, that's it.
Like, you've ignored me for the day. I'm going to attack your phone.
They're everywhere. So you still are aware that that's your source of information, and you've got to watch out for that. But there'll be people who will click in, multiple times in the day just to see if something's changed. What's been going on in a different part of the country. What's the knock-on effect from someone's point of view and that, and we've really got to be watch out for that. I think everything, certainly being aware of in society, but particularly seen with patients, that the general chronic stress levels have been cranked up in the last couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there was it was an amazing thing actually, and I'm like big myself up a bit on this bit, but I was on the Monday after the first weekend, so last Monday, not this one just gone, in the gym, and then someone had my headphones in, and I wasn't scrolling, because normally, like, what I'll do without even thinking is just start scrolling or going on Instagram or something, or reading my notifications in between sets. I'm that guy on his phone in between sets, but I didn't, and I was present, so I was looking around and just caught eye contact with this guy, and I was like, oh, is he going to ask to work in or something like that, which is normally fine, but I was having timed periods between my sets. And then he said, I saw your video a couple months ago and it changed my life. And I thought, wow, if I was sitting there with my head in my phone, I wouldn't have had that. And we were talking about an alcohol video, and it was that awareness thing. His habit was coming home from work after a shift late at night, having alcohol so he could sleep. But he said, since he's cut that out, he's had so much more energy. His body fat's gone down, his health, just his sleep's better, all this sort of thing. And he's much more present for his daughter, his like toddler. And I thought, hang on, if I was just scrolling through social media, I would have missed that, because like, I think I've seen him in the gym a few times, but like I have my headphones in a lot of the time without even anything on, because it's just me to get on with my workout. But it was actually nice to chat to him and actually like acknowledge that and see what other content that he wanted to see in my group. It was powerful. Yeah. And
well, what I also got out from that social dilemma, then if we identify that we are a product, we've also got to go the other way and saying, well, how do we use their product? And so I think, I find there's a lot of use in social media and that, but I'm very aware of how much time I spend in it, and then trying to cherry pick what information and things. So I've got a lot of clinical stuff and a lot of other podcasts and things that I pick up through Facebook. Yeah. And I'm glad that I have that. I've got a huge saved list, which is sometimes I'll work through, but I'm not. You've got to be very selective. I'm not really too worried about what someone else has had for dinner, or of whether the chicken did cross the road or not. It's those kind of things. I find that they are the ones which you can quite easily delve in, and then you've done a puzzle and you've done this, and next thing an hour's gone, and you're not going to get that hour back, especially when you've got family and that. So you've got to be really careful.
So what computer game are you? Click this number to find out or something.
Yeah.
What Frozen character?
What's my personality trait?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So there's lots of distractions. And that's the funny thing is also going back to stress levels, and that some people will be doing these things for distraction, but they never really are solving the stress. So you just keep having to do the distractions, because that's what most of them are, aren't they? Whether it's a gambling or whether it's alcohol or food, and they're distractions in an attempt to try and deflect really what the stress is, rather than saying, right, this is stressing me out. What can I do? If you're walking along and there's a drawing pin in your foot, eventually it's all very well to change the way you walk and all sorts, but eventually at some stage you've got to stop and say, you know what is causing my pain in my foot, so that I can walk properly. We've got to look at really the issue head on, and most of the issue head on is COVID, but there's so much more going on that people are forgetting. And that really is the big concern, not only from a healthcare perspective, like in hospitals and other appointments and all sorts, but people are getting totally consumed, almost to the point that in England, people are talking more about COVID than the weather. And then you know that things are going wrong, where people are talking about COVID more than the weather.
It's definitely something, especially in the UK.
We're going to get some normality back here.
Yeah, it's raining again. Oh, bloody weather. But I've found myself with a couple of friends, like one of my best friends, that we have different opinions, and we've had to say, I've said, look, I don't want to talk to you about that because I don't want to lose a friend over it, and I respect your opinion. He respects my opinion, and we'll talk about other things. But you had to have that conversation because it goes into that conversation, and I find it as well. Even like when I'm talking with my mum and my stepdad, we'll be like, we're not going to mention the C word, and it's like watching Harry Potter when you've got Voldemort. It's like, he who shall not be named. Like, it's just hanging around there. But eventually the conversation seems to come to it. Like we said, we weren't going to talk about it on here, and like we were going to talk about other things, but stress, like it's one of the biggest things causing stress. And we want to be in control, but it's hard to.
It's the elephant in the room, isn't it? Because you can't talk about stress or chronic stress without trying to make it relevant to that, that anyone who's listening to this podcast will understand the element of chronic stress, because there's no one since February, March time who's not been affected with chronic stress at some level. I don't have one patient who's come in and going, yeah, it's all right. Some people are, they're peed off because they can't go on holiday. That stresses them. They can't get their normal break. They can't do their normal sport. It's not actually the virus itself that most are stressed about. It's the quality of life around it.
In fact, I'll ask you a question.
That's the chronic stress.
You've seen me stressed over this period through obviously virtually when we were locked down and we were having chats there, and obviously coming back in and seeing my stress levels at some very I'm not going to say dark levels, it wasn't like that, but very highly stressed levels. If we go back, if you can remember, so 2012 was my last show, and you've been adjusting me since end of 2008, so just after my first show, I think it was. But I think it's been more stressful than when I was on actual stage depleting all the time.
Yeah, because it goes back to that element of that the stress on the body there was a different physiological stress, but also was relatively short term. So the stress on the body for a preparation is I know it's not a day or two, but there's a focus, and there's also a determination. So I'm focusing, I'm doing this for a goal and a purpose. So it's a totally different mindset. It's like the old thing of people say the pain of passing a kidney stone is worse than having a baby. And I said, well, the mindset is different. You hold a baby after giving birth and go and get the reward of a baby. Holding a kidney stone is not quite the same reward. So it's not going to be the same. It's not actually going to have the same impact. It's a different scenario. But this is a more of a different chronic stress. And this is stress that is stressing people's livelihoods and worrying about their health or the health of their loved ones or their business. It's on a different level.
So I think when we look at like people helping themselves, that finding out elsewhere what is stressing them out, adding the stress, like we know that, or what is the implication of this stress that you can control. So we can't necessarily control.
It's all about control.
So the food you're eating, the alcohol you're drinking, the extra stress, like what are you addicted to elsewhere that could, like, and it's about maybe just being aware of that so you can make slight changes. Like I'm not gonna, like if a client comes up to me, first off, I'll look at inflammation causing their body and everything like that when we look deeper into the health. But if they're saying they're having alcohol every single night, I want them to cut it down before we look to enjoy it, not cut it out before we look to enjoy it.
I would even go. I think that sometimes the other way of doing it psychologically is saying, adding rather than taking away, and then saying, why, let's not focus on the behavior. Let's focus on, as you said earlier, quite correctly, the why. So why are you doing that? And it's like, well, I'm stressed. Okay. And just keep saying why. And then eventually get to the point of going, so what traditionally helps you to cope things, better for? And getting away from the issue that people are doing something wrong or that the alcohol is the problem. It's probably the problem of a lot of knock-on effects, because if someone's drinking and the knock-on effect to family and work, whatever. But actually, in true sense, the alcohol is not the problem. Yeah. Same as the smoking and people smoking and can't give up smoking. The cigarette's not really the problem. It's why are you doing it?
Yeah, and then why are you doing it? Stop doing it.
Yeah. And then so if we improve the why or understand the why, then you realize actually, the alcohol doesn't serve its purpose. It actually doesn't deliver, because if it delivered, you wouldn't have to keep going back.
True. Yeah, that's a powerful. Well, it's a good one actually to finish the show on. Actually, when you think that, if your addiction delivered, why are you going back to it? That's powerful.
Yeah. So you can get. I mean, and we're not even looking at addiction. We're just looking at true basic coping mechanisms. And if you're having to do the same coping mechanism over and over again, that means the stress hasn't changed.
Definitely, that's a powerful one, especially for the guys to think about. Like, what is the coping mechanism you found? I've spoke about exercise being one of my coping mechanisms, which is actually made me a bit more anxious. Are they going to close things again and all that sort of stuff? But again, what can I control? What are the reasons that I exercise and the stress levels elsewhere, and getting a grip on those. So,
and I think people know themselves. At the end of the day, people know what the underlying issue is, and sometimes it's they're having difficulty to approach that, and then they can look for support. There's support out there. We're perfectly placed to provide some level of support, some support at other levels, or refer or suggest others out there.
Definitely. So if anyone needs any further help on this topic, then and you're worried about things that not things that are stressing you out, but the results of that. So are you eating more as a result? Are you not exercising? Are you just not able to focus? And how can you get through that? Then drop us a message or speak to Roger in the clinic. And he can always give you my details if you want to speak to me and you're speaking to Roger, then we can swap details the other way around.
Particularly if people are saying, I'm identifying the stress, I'm coping with it better, but now I want to get my health back on track. What foods can I do to help cope with the stress? And the mindset shifted now to being proactive. Then there's some really good stuff out there to support you.
Definitely. Well, guys, thank you for joining us.
And thank you for yours, Ollie, as well, because without your input, and then I speak for myself, for us both making the time, this wouldn't happen. So it's always good to hook up with you.
Pleasure. And we'll do it again in another couple of weeks.
Yeah, we'll do, mate.
Take care.
Okay, come on, you Spurs.